But this weekend, this document was making its round online, claiming to be Nolan's toxicology report. The family says it's fake. The representatives say it's fake. The officials in Mississippi say it's fake. The official toxicology report hasn't even been released yet. And people are arguing over this anyways. You can take it down, Andy. People are arguing over this anyways, as if it is real.
A toxicology report suddenly appeared online, and within hours, investigators confirmed it was fake.
Again, it is not real.
But here's the real question nobody can answer. Was this just internet misinformation, or was someone trying to protect a suspect? In this video, we're going to break down exactly why this fake report matters, who may have benefited from it, what investigators have actually confirmed, and the disturbing questions that still don't have answers. Who created the fake toxicology report? A document claiming to reveal details about Nolan Wells' toxicology results began circulating online, creating immediate questions about where it came from, who prepared it, and why it appeared before any verified release from official sources. The report presented itself as a professional forensic document containing details that might appear connected to the investigation. However, as questions began to emerge, the authenticity of the document became the central issue. The most important question was not only what the report claimed, but whether the report itself had ever been created by an official authority. The first appearance of the alleged toxicology report became a critical point in understanding how misinformation can enter a high-profile investigation. The document did not emerge through a confirmed law enforcement announcement or an official forensic agency release. Instead, it began spreading through online platforms where users shared screenshots and copies of the alleged report. As the document moved between different accounts and communities, its original source became increasingly difficult to identify. The lack of a verified chain of custody created uncertainty about who first introduced the document into public circulation. At first glance, the report appeared to contain elements commonly associated with forensic documentation, including formal language and references that suggested an investigative source. These details caused some individuals following the Nolan Wells case to treat the document as potentially legitimate. However, appearance alone does not establish authenticity. Forensic reports are normally connected to specific agencies, laboratory records, case identifiers, and controlled distribution procedures. Without confirmation from the responsible authorities, the document could not be considered verified evidence. The question of who created the report remains separate from the question of what information the report contained. A document can appear official while having no connection to an official investigation. Investigators and officials must examine the origin of such material, including who had access to genuine case information, who had the ability to reproduce official-looking documents, and what purpose the release may have served. As the alleged report continued circulating, attention shifted toward identifying the earliest known source. Determining who first uploaded, shared, or distributed the document could provide important information about its creation. Digital records, archive posts, timestamps, and account activity can sometimes help establish how information moved online. However, unless those records are publicly verified, the exact origin of the document remains uncertain. The response from agencies involved in the Nolan Wells investigation became another important factor. Official investigators generally rely on verified evidence rather than documents distributed through unofficial channels. A publicly circulating report does not automatically become part of an investigation unless authorities confirm its authenticity and relevance. The absence of official confirmation raised additional concerns about whether the document represented genuine information or an attempt to create confusion around the case. The appearance of a fake toxicology report introduces several possible explanations. It could have been created by someone attempting to spread false information, someone trying to influence public discussion, or someone attempting to make an unofficial claim appear legitimate. However, without verified evidence identifying the creator, these possibilities remain theories rather than established facts. What makes the situation significant is that the report itself may not be the only important evidence. The person who created it, the reason it was created, and the moment it was released may reveal more about the circumstances surrounding its appearance. A false document requires planning, access to information, and understanding how official records appear. The investigation into the alleged fake toxicology report therefore begins with a simple but unresolved question. Where did this document truly come from? and who had the motive to create something that appeared connected to Nolan Wells' case. If the report was fake, the identity of its creator could become the most important unanswered part of the entire controversy. Who leaked the fake report and why? The appearance of the alleged fake Toxicology report raised one investigation question, but the spread of that document created another. Even if the document itself was not authentic, the method through which it entered public discussion became an important part of the controversy. A fake document does not spread by accident alone. It requires a source, a method of distribution, and a point where the information begins reaching a larger audience. The difference between a leak and a fabricated document became central to understanding what happened. A genuine leak usually involves unauthorized release of real information from a protected source. A fabricated document, however, involves the creation of false material designed to appear legitimate. In the Nolan Wells case, the uncertainty surrounding the report created questions about whether someone obtained real information and altered it, or whether the entire document was created without access to official records. The earliest stages of the report's circulation remain important because the first person or account to share the document may provide clues about its origin. Online investigations often examine archive posts, upload times, deleted content, and account activity to determine where information first appeared. However, without verified digital records connecting a specific individual to the original upload, the identity of the first distributor remains unconfirmed. The report reportedly moved through online platforms where case discussions were already taking place. As more users shared copies, screenshots, and claims about its authenticity, separating the original source from later reposts became increasingly difficult. A document can quickly lose its original context once it spreads across multiple accounts, making it challenging to determine who created it, who released it, and who simply repeated information they believe was accurate. Another important issue is whether the release was anonymous by design. Individuals who distribute false or unverified information often avoid direct identification by using temporary accounts, unnamed sources, or indirect sharing methods. This does not prove wrongdoing by any specific person, but it creates additional difficulties for investigators attempting to establish responsibility. The timing of the release also became a significant factor. Information connected to an active investigation can influence public discussion depending on when it appears. A document released during a period of uncertainty may receive greater attention because people are searching for answers. This creates an environment where unverified information can gain visibility before authorities have an opportunity to confirm or deny its accuracy. Several possible motives could explain why someone would distribute a fake toxicology report. One possibility is an attempt to influence public opinion about the case. Another possibility is gaining attention through the release of information that appears exclusive. A third possibility is that someone wanted to create confusion around existing theories. However, these remain possible explanations rather than confirmed motives. The investigation into the leak therefore depends on identifying a connection between the document and the person or account responsible for introducing it into public circulation. The creator of the document and the person who distributed it may be the same individual, or they may be separate parties. One person could have produced a material while another person amplified it by sharing it widely. This distinction is important because a spread of misinformation can sometimes reveal more than the false information itself. The pathway of distribution, the timing of release, and the audience targeted may provide clues about the purpose behind the document. But the most important question remains unanswered. If someone intentionally released this report into the public, the reason behind that decision could reveal why the document appeared at that specific moment. But if someone leaked it, then what was the purpose? Was someone trying to detect the main suspect? The question surrounding the alleged fake toxicology report was not limited to who created it or who distributed it. Another issue quickly became central: whether the information inside the document appeared to support a specific narrative within the Nolan Wells investigation. A false report can influence a case not only through the information it provides, but also through the direction it pushes public attention. When examining possible motive behind a misleading document, investigators often look at the concept of benefit. This does not mean that a person who appears to benefit from certain information is automatically responsible for creating it. However, Understanding who gains from a particular narrative can help identify possible reasons why certain claims are promoted. The alleged report raised questions because any information connected to toxicology findings could potentially influence how people view different theories surrounding Nolan Wells' death. Toxicology evidence is often considered an important part in an investigation because it can affect interpretations about circumstances, events, and possible involvement of other individuals. A document claiming to reveal such information could therefore change public perception before verified evidence is available. One important question is whether the fake report appeared to strengthen one specific theory while weakening others. If the information inside the document suggested a particular explanation for what happened, it could shift attention towards certain possibilities and away from others. However, because the authenticity of the report itself was questioned, any conclusions based on its contents will remain unverified. The idea that someone may have attempted to protect a suspect remains a theory and has not been established through confirmed evidence. For such a claim to be proven, investigators would need evidence connecting the creator or distributor of the document to a specific individual, motive, or effort to influence the investigation. Another factor is a possibility that the report was designed to create distance from certain questions. In high-profile investigations, misinformation can sometimes redirect public discussion by introducing a new explanation or by creating doubt around existing evidence. If a false document causes people to focus on one narrative, it may reduce attention toward other areas of the investigation. However, the opposite possibility must also be considered. A fake report may not have been created to protect anyone. It could have been produced simply to gain attention, create online discussion, or take advantage of public interest in the case. Without verified information about the creator's intentions, motive remains uncertain. The benefit analysis, therefore, requires careful examination. Who gained from the report appearing credible? Which theories received more attention after the document circulated? Did the information reduce pressure on a specific person, or did it simply create more confusion around an already complicated investigation? These questions become important because misinformation does not only affect facts, it affects focus. The direction of public attention can change depending on what information appears first and what claims receive the most visibility. If someone intentionally created or distributed the fake toxicology report, the purpose behind that action may be hidden within the consequences. The person responsible may have wanted to support a specific narrative, challenge another theory, or simply create uncertainty. But if someone benefited from the appearance of this report, another question follows. If anyone benefited, then whose man did Nixon become? Who benefited most from the fake toxicology report? The impact of the alleged fake toxicology report was not limited to the question of authenticity. Another important part of the investigation was understanding who may have benefited from the document appearing credible. In any investigation involving disputed information, authorities often examine the consequences of that information, including whether it changed public perception, redirected attention, or created an advantage for a particular narrative. The first possible benefit involved public perception. When a document appears to contain official forensic information, it can influence how people interpret a case before verified evidence is available. A report connected to toxicology findings may create assumptions about what happened, who may have been involved, and which explanations appear more likely. Even if the information is later questioned, the initial impression can continue affecting public discussion. This creates an important difference between evidence and perception. Evidence must meet investigative and legal standards, while public perception can be influenced by information that has not been verified. A fake report does not need to be accepted as fact by everyone to have an impact. Simply introducing a new claim into the conversation can change the direction of discussions surrounding a case. Another possible benefit involves narrative advantage. If the report supported one specific interpretation of events, individuals connected to that interpretation could appear to receive indirect benefit. This does not establish involvement or responsibility, but it explains why investigators examining misinformation often ask who gained from a particular claim becoming widely accepted. The report may also have affected attention. Investigations often involve multiple theories, evidence sources, and unanswered questions. When new information appears, especially information presented as forensic evidence, Public attention can move toward that new development. As a result, other aspects of the investigation may receive less focus while the new claim dominates discussion. However, determining who benefited requires more than identifying who appeared to gain from the information. A person or a theory receiving attention after a document is released does not automatically prove that the person created or supported the document. Investigators must establish connections through verified evidence rather than assumptions based only on outcomes. The possibility remains that the fake report was created without a specific beneficiary. It may have been produced to generate attention, create confusion, or influence online conversations without directly protecting any individual. The motive behind such a document can only be understood by identifying its source and examining the circumstances surrounding its creation. The relationship between misinformation and investigations is complex because false information can create real consequences. Even when authorities recognize that a document is unreliable, the time spent addressing can affect how resources and public attention are directed. The key question is not only who benefited after the report appeared, but whether the benefit was intentional. If someone created the document knowing that it could shift perception, then the report itself may have been part of a larger attempt to influence how the case was viewed. But public perception was only one possible effect. A false toxicology report could also create challenges for the investigation itself. But it wasn't just the public. The investigation could have been affected too. Could the fake report have changed an investigation? The release of an alleged fake toxicology report created concerns beyond public discussion, because false information connected to an active investigation can affect the direction, timing, and resources of that investigation. Even when investigators recognize that a document may not be authentic, evaluating and responding to such information can require time and attention that would otherwise be focused on verified evidence. One possible impact involves investigative resources. Law enforcement agencies investigating a complex case must carefully evaluate every piece of information that appears relevant. A document claiming to contain forensic findings may require examination, verification attempts, and comparison with official records. If investigators spend time determining whether a report is genuine, those efforts can create additional workload during an already demanding investigation. Another possible area of impact involves witnesses and individuals connected to the case. Publicly circulated information can influence what people believe they know about an investigation. Witnesses may come forward with information based on inaccurate assumptions, or existing statements may be viewed differently because of claims presented in an unofficial document. Investigators must separate verified testimony from information influenced by outside sources. Public pressure can also affect the environment surrounding an investigation. High-profile cases often receive significant attention, and new claims involving forensic evidence can increase demands for answers. While public interest can sometimes encourage transparency, pressure created by unverified information can also make it more difficult for investigators to communicate only confirmed facts. A false report may also create delays by forcing investigators to address questions that are not connected to reliable evidence. Instead of advancing through verified findings, authorities may need to examine whether the information has any legitimate connection to the case. This process is necessary because ignoring possible evidence can create risks, but investigating false information can consume valuable resources. However, there is no confirmed evidence that the alleged fake toxicology report directly changed the official investigation into Nolan Wells' case. The exact impact depends on whether investigators treated the document as relevant material, whether it influenced any investigative decisions, and whether it affected access to legitimate evidence. The difference between evidence and information is important. Evidence must be evaluated through proper investigative procedures, while information circulating online may only represent a claim. A document can attract widespread attention without meeting the standards required for investigative use. The larger concern is that misinformation can create uncertainty around a case by introducing questions that are difficult to resolve. When investigators must determine what is real and what is false, the process of finding answers can become more complicated. The alleged report, therefore, raises a broader question about influence. If a fake document was capable of changing public discussion, attracting investigative attention, or affecting perception of witnesses, then its existence alone may have had consequences. But the next question is whether the report was created only to confuse the investigation, or whether it was designed to shape what people believed about the case. Was this an attempt to mislead the public? The circulation of the alleged fake toxicology report raised a broader question about the purpose behind its release. Beyond the issue of who created the document, investigators and observers must consider whether the report was designed to influence public understanding of a Nolan Wells case. When unverified information appears during an active investigation, its impact often depends on how quickly it spreads and how many people accept it before verification occurs. The psychology behind viral documents is an important factor in understanding misinformation. Documents that appear official often receive more attention because they create impression of authority. A report containing professional language, structured formatting, or references that resemble official records may appear more credible to individuals who do not have access to the original investigation materials. This can allow unverified information to spread before questions about authenticity are fully examined. Social media platforms can accelerate this process. Once a document is shared by multiple accounts, the focus can shift from determining whether the information is accurate to discussing the claims inside the document. Each repost can remove the original context, making it harder to identify where the information started and whether the source was reliable. Another important issue is verification failure. In criminal investigations, official evidence normally passes through controlled procedures before being publicly released. However, online information often moves faster than traditional verification processes. When a document appears during a period of high public interest, people may react to the content before authorities have confirmed whether it is genuine. The spread of the alleged report also created challenges for media coverage and public discussion. Journalists and independent researchers must evaluate whether information comes from verified sources before presenting it as fact. If a false document receives significant attention, media organizations may need to spend additional time clarifying what is known, what is unknown, and what cannot be confirmed. However, the existence of widespread discussion does not automatically prove that the report was created as part of an intentional misinformation campaign. The creator's purpose remains unknown unless investigators establish evidence connecting the document to a specific person, motive, or action. Several possibilities remain. The document could have been created to influence public opinion, attract attention, or create confusion around the investigation. It could also have resulted from someone sharing inaccurate information without confirming its authenticity. The difference between intentional deception and careless distribution depends on evidence that has not been publicly established. The most important issue is that misinformation can have lasting effects even after it's questioned. Once a claim enters public discussion, correcting that claim can become more difficult than spreading it originally. The alleged fake toxicology report, therefore, represents more than a disputed document. It represents a question about how information moves, how quickly assumptions form, and how difficult it can be to separate verified evidence from online claims. But before determining whether the public was intentionally misled, another question remains. Did people actually believe the report before its authenticity was challenged? Did anyone believe the fake report before it was debunked? Before questions about authenticity could be fully answered, the alleged fake toxicology report had already entered public discussion. The speed at which the document circulated created an important issue. Whether people accepted the information as genuine before any official confirmation or verification process took place. The early reaction to the report demonstrated how quickly unverified information can influence conversations surrounding a high-profile investigation. As copies of the document appeared online, users began sharing claims about what the report supposedly revealed. Many discussions focused on the contents of the document, rather than the more important question of whether the document itself had a verified origin. Viral posts and repeated sharing can create the appearance of credibility. When the same information appears across multiple accounts, some individuals may interpret the repeated exposure as confirmation. However, repetition does not establish accuracy. A claim can spread widely while still lacking evidence, official confirmation, or reliable source. The timeline of the rumor became an important part of understanding its impact. Before the report was challenged, some people treated the document as possible evidence connected to Nolan Wells' case. The appearance of official formatting and forensic language may have contributed to early acceptance among individuals following the investigation. Without access to official records, Many people relied on the appearance of the document rather than confirmed information. Public reactions also showed how misinformation can create different interpretations of the same event. Some individuals questioned the report immediately, while others accepted the claims until additional information raised concerns about its authenticity. This difference in reaction is common when information appears during an ongoing investigation where verified details remain limited. The early acceptance of the report does not indicate that people intentionally supported false information. In many cases, individuals share documents because they believe the information may be important. The responsibility for determining authenticity usually depends on verification from reliable sources, investigative authorities, or official records. The impact of early belief can still be significant. Once a claim becomes part of public discussion, later corrections may not completely remove its influence. Some people may continue referring to the original information even after questions about its accuracy emerge. This creates a challenge for investigations because public understanding can develop around information that has not passed official review. Investigators must then address not only the fact of the case, but also the confusion created by inaccurate claims. The alleged fake toxicology report therefore became an example of how quickly a document can gain attention before its legitimacy is established. The question was not only whether people believed it, but how far the information traveled before the truth about the document became clear. And as the report continued to be examined, another question emerged. Was this simply a false document, or was it part of a larger misinformation effort surrounding the Nolan Wells investigation? Was this the biggest misinformation campaign in the case? The alleged fake toxicology report raised a larger question about the role of misinformation throughout the Nolan Wells investigation. While the document itself became a major point of discussion, understanding its significance requires examining whether it was an isolated incident or part of a wider pattern of inaccurate information surrounding the case. High-profile investigations often attract rumors, speculation, and unofficial claims, especially when verified details are limited. Before and after the appearance of the alleged report, different pieces of information circulated online, including claims presented through screenshots, posts, and statements that did not always have confirmed sources. Each individual claim carried the possibility of influencing public understanding before authorities could verify the information. Fake screenshots and altered documents represent a particular challenge because they can appear similar to genuine material. A screenshot can remove important context, hide the original source, or make it difficult to determine whether the information has been changed. Once such material begins spreading, identify the original creator, and separating authentic information from false claims becomes increasingly complicated. The alleged toxicology report stood out because it involved forensic information. Documents connected to medical or investigative findings often receive greater attention because people associate them with official conclusions. However, without confirmation from the responsible authorities, such material remains unverified and cannot meet the standard required for investigative evidence. Official responses and later clarification play an important role in addressing misinformation. When authorities or reliable sources identify problems with a claim, the information can be challenged. However, corrections often spread more slowly than the original rumor, meaning inaccurate information may continue circulating even after questions about its accuracy are raised. A pattern analysis of misinformation requires examining several factors: how often false claims appeared, whether they followed similar methods of distribution, whether they targeted specific theories, and whether they produced similar effects on public discussion. These factors can help determine whether separate incidents were connected or simply individual examples of online speculation. However, identifying a pattern does not automatically prove a coordinated campaign. Multiple false claims can appear around the same investigation without being created by the same person or for the same purpose. Establishing a connection requires evidence showing common sources, shared methods, or communication between those responsible. The significance of the fake toxicology report depends on its place within this broader environment. If it was simply another false claim, its impact may have been limited to temporary confusion. If it represented a deliberate attempt to influence the case, understanding its origin becomes more important. The unanswered question is whether this report was the largest misinformation event surrounding Nolan Wells' case, or whether it was one part of a much larger effort to shape public perception. Because the next issue is not only whether the report was false, but whether it was created to support one specific theory. Did the fake report target one specific theory? The alleged fake toxicology report raised another important question within the Nolan Wells investigation: whether the information was created simply to spread false details, or whether it's designed to strengthen one specific explanation while weakening others. When misinformation appears during an active investigation, one method of analysis is examining whether the information appears to benefit a particular theory. A document containing false forensic information can influence how people interpret events. If the report appears to support one explanation of what happened, public attention may shift toward that possibility. At the same time, theories that do not align with the information presented in the document may receive less attention. This process can create what investigators sometimes describe as a narrative advantage, where one interpretation appears stronger because of the information being circulated. However, determining whether the report targeted a specific theory requires separating evidence from speculation. The existence of possible benefit does not prove that the creator intended to support a particular conclusion. A theory becoming more discussed after a document appears does not establish a direct connection between the document and the people involved in that theory. The timeline of events is also important. Investigators would need to examine when the report appeared, what information was already public at that time, and whether the document changed the direction of existing discussions. If a false report appeared after a certain theory gained attention, it may raise questions about whether the document was intended to influence that discussion. However, without evidence identifying creator and motive, such conclusions remain unconfirmed. Another factor is whether the report weakened competing explanations. False information can sometimes work by creating doubt around certain possibilities rather than directly proving another one. By introducing a specific claim, a document may cause people to focus on one area of an investigation while overlooking others. The difference between stronger theories and weaker theories depends on verified evidence, not online narratives. Investigations rely on physical evidence, witness information, official records, and forensic analysis. A fake document cannot strengthen a theory through evidence because the information itself has not met investigative standards. The possibility of narrative engineering remains a question rather than an established fact. If someone intentionally created the report, investigators would need to determine whether the goal was to redirect attention, protect an individual, challenge a theory, or create general confusion. The importance of the alleged report may therefore come from what it attempted to change. The information inside the document may have been false, but the direction it pushed public attention could reveal the purpose behind its creation. The next question is whether the report was designed only to influence theories, or whether it was created to change public opinion about the entire investigation. Was the fake report designed to change public opinion? The alleged fake toxicology report created questions not only about the information contained, but also about the possible psychological impact it had on people following the Nolan Wells investigation. When false information appears in a case receiving public attention, its influence can extend beyond facts and evidence. It can shape how people interpret events, evaluate suspects, and understand competing theories. One possible effect of such information is confirmation bias. People often give more attention to information that supports beliefs they already hold. If someone already believed a particular theory about the investigation, a document that appeared to confirm that theory could receive less skepticism and more acceptance. This does not mean the information was accurate, but explains how unverified claims can gain influence. The presentation of the alleged report may also have affected public reaction. A document that appears official can create a stronger response because people associate forensic records with authority and certainty. The language, structure, and appearance of a report can influence perception before the information inside it has been independently verified. Online narratives can develop quickly when large numbers of people discuss the same claim. Once a specific explanation becomes popular, additional conversations may focus on defending or challenging that explanation rather than examining the original source of the information. This can create an environment where speculation becomes connected with the case before evidence has been established. A viral misinformation strategy, if intentional, would typically rely on speed, appearance, and emotional engagement. A claim that creates strong reactions is more likely to be shared and discussed. However, determining whether the alleged report was created as part of such a strategy requires evidence showing intent, planning, or coordination. The existence of public discussion alone does not prove manipulation. People may share information because they believe it is important, because they are searching for answers, or because they are unaware that the information has not been verified. The responsibility for determining authenticity remains with investigators, official sources, and evidence-based review. The question of whether the report was designed to change public opinion therefore depends on understanding its purpose. Did someone create it to push a specific narrative? Was it intended to influence how people viewed certain individuals or theories? Or was it simply another example of inaccurate information spreading during a high-interest investigation? The answer cannot be established without identifying the source and examining the evidence behind its creation. However, the potential impact remains significant because public opinion can influence discussions surrounding a case even when official evidence remains unchanged. The report may have affected what people believe, but another question remains. Could this influence have extended beyond public opinion and created consequences for the investigation itself? Could this leak be more important than the report itself? The alleged fake toxicology report created one investigation, but the way that report entered public circulation created another. While the contents of the document became the main focus of discussion, the leak itself may provide important information about its origin, purpose, and the person or process responsible for bringing it into public attention. In digital investigations, the source of information can sometimes be more significant than the information itself. A document may contain false claims, but the method used to distribute it can reveal important details. Investigators examining such material may look at metadata, upload history, account activity, and other digital records that can help establish where the document originated. Metadata can provide technical information connected to a file, including creation details, modification history, and other digital characteristics. However, metadata can also be removed, changed, or manipulated. Therefore, while it may provide possible leads, it must be examined alongside other evidence before any conclusion can be reached. The distribution process is another important factor. Investigators would need to understand how the report moved from its original source to wider audiences. Questions about the first upload, early sharing accounts, and the timeline of circulation can help determine whether the spread was accidental, organized, or influenced by specific individuals. Timing may also provide additional context. A document released during a sensitive moment in an investigation may have a different impact than the same document released at another time. Investigators examining possible motives often consider whether the timing created an advantage for a particular narrative or changed the focus of public attention. The digital footprint of the report could become one of the most important areas of examination. Online activity can sometimes reveal connections between accounts, repeated sharing patterns, or attempts to hide the original source. However, identifying a digital connection does not automatically prove responsibility. Additional evidence would be required to establish who created or distributed the material. The distinction between the report and the leak is therefore significant. The report itself may have contained inaccurate information, but the decision to release it, promote it. If the leak was carefully timed or strategically distributed, it could suggest that the focus should move away from only analyzing the false information and toward understanding the person responsible for introducing it. The unanswered question is whether the leak was simply the beginning of the controversy or the most important clue within it. Because before determining who created the document, investigators would need to understand who had access to the information that the document attempted to imitate. Who had access to the original toxicology information? The existence of an alleged fake toxicology report raises one of the most important questions in the investigation. Where could the information inside that document have come from? Even if the report itself was not authentic, creating a document that appears connected to real forensic information may require knowledge of details that are not publicly available. This makes access, opportunity, and information control important areas of examination. One of the first factors investigators would consider is a chain of custody surrounding official toxicology information. Forensic results are normally handled through controlled procedures involving medical professionals, laboratories, investigators, and authorized personnel. These procedures exist to protect the accuracy, privacy, and reliability of sensitive information connected to an investigation. Original toxicology information is generally not available to the public before official release. Access is usually limited to individuals with a legitimate role in the investigative or medical process. This can include authorized law enforcement personnel, forensic specialists, medical examiners, and other individuals responsible for handling case-related records. Medical records and toxicology findings are protected information. The release of such material outside authorized channels can involve privacy concerns and potential legal issues, depending on the circumstances. Because of this, investigators examining a possible leak would need to determine whether the person responsible had direct access to original information or whether the document was created using publicly available details. Another possibility is that the creator did not have access to confidential records at all. A false report can sometimes be produced by using publicly known information combined with realistic formatting and language. In such cases, the appearance of authenticity may come from imitation rather than actual access to protected information. Determining opportunity is therefore different from proving responsibility. A person having possible access to information does not establish that they created or distributed a fake document. Investigators would need additional evidence connecting specific individual to the creation, modification, or release of the report. The timing of a leak may also provide important context. If the document appeared before certain information became public, investigators would examine how the creator could have known those details. If the document only contained publicly available information, the possibility of outside fabrication would remain. The question of access becomes central because information has a source. Whether the report came from an unauthorized disclosure, a fabricated document, or a combination of public and private details remains a matter requiring evidence. The focus therefore shifts from what the fake report claimed to who could have created something that looked believable. Because before investigators can determine why the document appeared, they must first understand how someone could have obtained the information needed to make it appear real. How did investigators discover the report was fake? The alleged toxicology report did not become questionable because of one single detail. Instead, concerns about its authenticity developed through examination of the document itself, comparisons with official procedures, and questions about whether the information matched the standard expected from a legitimate forensic record. One of the first areas examined in disputed documents is formatting. Official forensic reports usually follow specific structures, including consistent layout, professional terminology, standardized references, and documentation procedures. A document that appears similar to an official record but contains unusual formatting choices can raise questions about whether it originated from a legitimate source. Missing signatures or verification details can also become important indicators. Authentic forensic documents typically include information showing who prepared, reviewed, or authorized a report. If expected identification details, signatures, or official confirmations are absent, the reliability of the document may be questioned. Another area of examination involves references and terminology. Forensic reports contain specific language connected to laboratory procedures, case records, and professional standards. Incorrect references, unusual wording, or details that do not match known procedures can suggest that a document may not have been created through an official process. However, identifying problems with a document does not automatically reveal who created it. It only establishes that the material may not meet the standards required for official evidence. Determining the source requires a separate investigation into digital records, distribution patterns, and possible access to information. Official confirmation plays an important role in resolving questions about disputed evidence. Investigators and authorized agencies rely on verified records rather than documents circulating through unofficial channels. When a report cannot be connected to an official source, its contents cannot be treated as confirmed investigative findings. The process of determining that a document is unreliable often involves comparing the disputed material with known official procedures. Investigators may examine whether the document matches the standards used by forensic agencies, whether the information corresponds to verified records, and whether any inconsistencies exist. The discovery that a report is fake does not mean every detail inside it was random. In some cases, False documents are created using real terminology and realistic structures to appear convincing. This is why careful verification is necessary before accepting any document as evidence. The alleged fake toxicology report therefore became a question of authenticity. Before became a question of meaning. Before asking what the report revealed, investigators had to determine whether it revealed anything at all. But after the document was challenged, another question remained. If the fake report was not real, what information did the actual toxicology findings contain? What did the real toxicology report actually say? After the alleged fake toxicology report was questioned, attention shifted toward the information that could actually be verified. The most important distinction in the investigation became the difference between a document that appeared official and evidence that had been confirmed through legitimate investigative procedures. A real toxicology report is based on scientific testing, laboratory analysis, and documented procedures. Unlike an unofficial document circulating online, official findings must be connected to authorized professionals, verified records, and established forensic standards. These requirements exist to ensure the conclusions are based on evidence rather than assumptions. The confirmed information from an official toxicology examination represents only what the testing process can establish. Toxicology findings may provide information about substances detected, possible exposure, or medical factors connected to a person's condition. However, such findings do not automatically explain every circumstance surrounding a death or determine responsibility without additional evidence. This distinction became important because public discussion around the fake report created several misconceptions. Some people interpreted the alleged document as a complete explanation of what happened, even though the authenticity of the material had not been established. A forensic report, whether real or false, must be evaluated within the larger context of the investigation. The difference between the fake report and verified findings is therefore significant. A fabricated document may contain claims designed to appear convincing, but it does not carry the same evidentiary value as an official forensic record. Investigators must rely on confirmed information, laboratory procedures, and document conclusions rather than material distributed to unofficial sources. Another challenge involves public expectations surrounding toxicology results. Many people assume that forensic testing will provide a simple answer, but toxicology is only one part of a broader investigation. Results must be interpreted alongside other evidence, including timelines, witness statements, physical findings, and investigative records. The existence of a fake report may have created confusion by making certain claims appear more certain than they actually were. This is why official confirmation is essential. Without verified findings, information remains a claim rather than evidence. The real toxicology information, when properly examined, represents the evidence-based position of the investigation rather than the narrative created by an unofficial document. Understanding that difference is necessary to separate fact from speculation. The larger question is not only what the real report contained, but whether the fake version caused people to overlook other important evidence connected to Nolan Wells' case. Because even a false document can have consequences if it changes what people focus on. Did the fake report distract from the real evidence? The appearance of the alleged fake toxicology report introduced a new focus within the Nolan Wells investigation, but also raised a more important concern: whether attention placed on a false document caused people to overlook the actual evidence connected to the case. In any investigation, verified evidence remains a foundation, but public attention can sometimes shift toward information that receives the most visibility rather than information that carries the greatest investigative value. The real investigation depends on evidence collected through official procedures, including physical findings, witness information, verified records, and documented timelines. These elements require careful examination because they are connected directly to the events being investigated. Unlike an online document with an uncertain origin, official evidence must pass through investigative review before it can influence conclusions. The circulation of fake report created the possibility that important details receive less attention. When a disputed document becomes a center of public discussion, other aspects of a case may receive fewer questions. This does not mean those clues were ignored by investigators, but public conversations can become focused on what issue while other evidence remains less visible. Another concern involves timeline analysis. Investigators examine events in chronological order to understand what happened, when it happened, and how different pieces of information connect. A false document appearing at a specific point in the investigation can influence how people interpret that timeline, even if the document itself has no evidentiary value. Public distraction is one of the possible effects of misinformation. A claim does not need to be accepted by everyone to change the direction of discussion. The amount of attention given to a false report can reduce focus on verified information, unanswered questions, and evidence that requires further examination. However, there is no confirmed evidence that investigators abandoned or ignored legitimate evidence because of the alleged report. Law enforcement agencies are expected to evaluate information based on reliability and investigative relevance. A false document may create additional work, but it does not replace official evidence. The comparison between the fake report and the actual investigation highlights an important difference. The fake document created questions about who made it and why, while the real evidence continues to determine the direction of the case. The significance of the report may therefore not be in what it revealed, but in what it potentially distracted people from examining. If someone created the document intentionally, the goal may have been less about providing information and more about changing where attention was placed. But another question remains: could this distraction have created delays that affected the search for answers in the Nolan Wells investigation? Could the fake report delay justice for Nolan Wells? The alleged fake toxicology report created questions about misinformation, but another concern remained: whether the existence of such a document could have delayed progress toward finding answers in the Nolan Wells investigation. False information does not need to completely change an investigation to create consequences. Even limited disruption can affect the time, resources, and attention required to examine legitimate evidence. One possible impact involves investigative slowdown. When authorities become aware of a document claiming to contain important forensic information, they must determine whether it has any connection to the case. This process can require reviewing the document, comparing it with known records, and determining whether further investigation is necessary. Although verification is an essential responsibility, time spent examining false material can reduce the resources available for other investigative tasks. Witness information can also be affected by misinformation. In ongoing investigations, witness memories and statements are important parts of building a timeline. When false information becomes widely discussed, it can influence how people remember events, interpret details, or communicate information to investigators. This does not mean witnesses intentionally provided inaccurate information, but outside claims can create additional challenges when evaluating testimony. Police workload is another factor. Investigators must manage multiple responsibilities, including reviewing evidence, conducting interviews, analyzing records, and following leads. A fake document may create additional tasks that were not part of the original investigator process. The effect may be limited, but in complex cases, even small distractions can require attention. Historical examples from criminal investigations have shown that misinformation can complicate public understanding and investigative efforts. False tips, inaccurate claims, and unreliable information have previously required investigators to separate useful leads from distractions. The challenge is not simply finding information, but determining which information to be trusted. However, there is no confirmed evidence that the alleged fake toxicology report directly delayed justice in Nolan Wells' case. The actual impact would depend on how investigators responded to the document, whether it influenced official decisions, and whether resources were redirected because of it. The difference between a delay and an inconvenience is important. Investigations routinely examine questionable information because ignoring possible evidence can create risks. The process of verification is part of responsible investigative work, even when the information later proves unreliable. The larger concern is whether someone created the report knowing it could interfere with the search for answers. If the document was intentionally designed to consume attention or create confusion, then its impact may extend beyond misinformation. But another question remains: if someone knowingly created a false forensic document, what legal consequences could follow from that action? What happens if someone intentionally created a fake report? The question surrounding the alleged fake toxicology report extends beyond misinformation and into the area of legal responsibility. If evidence showed that someone intentionally created a false forensic document and presented it as connected to an active investigation, the consequences could become more serious than simply spreading inaccurate information. Creating or distributing false investigative material can potentially interfere with official processes. Law enforcement investigations depend on accurate information, reliable evidence, and proper documentation. A deliberately fabricated report could create confusion, redirect attention, or influence how individuals interpret important facts connected to a case. Investigation obstruction is one possible legal concern of situations where false information is intentionally used to interfere with authorities. However, proving obstruction requires more than showing that a document was false. Investigators would need evidence demonstrating that the person responsible knowingly created or distributed the material with the purpose of effecting an official investigation. Criminal consequences would depend on several factors, including the content of the document, the identity of the creator, the jurisdiction involved, and the intent behind the action. Laws in many jurisdictions address issues such as falsifying records, impersonating official sources, interfering with investigations, or knowingly providing false information to authorities. The legal framework surrounding such actions is based heavily on intent and evidence. A person who accidentally shares inaccurate information is treated differently from someone who intentionally creates a false document designed to appear authentic. The difference between misinformation and deliberate deception is determined through investigation and proof. Historical examples from criminal cases have shown that fabricated evidence and false claims can create serious challenges for investigators. In some cases, authorities have had to examine whether false information was created to protect someone, damage another person, attract public attention, or interfere with legal procedures. However, the existence of an alleged fake report does not automatically establish criminal wrongdoing. Before any legal action could occur, investigators would need to identify the creator, determine how the document was produced, establish whether the person knew it was false, and prove that the action violated applicable laws. The most important issue is the connection between the document and the intention behind it. A fake report created as a mistake, an online rumor, or a deliberate attempt to influence an investigation would represent very different situations under the law. The investigation into the alleged document therefore depends not only on discovering that it was false, but also on understanding why it was created and what the creator intended to accomplish. Because if the report was part of a larger effort to control information around Nolan Wells' case, the next question becomes whether the document was an isolated act or a piece of something larger. Was the fake report part of a bigger cover-up? The existence of an alleged fake toxicology report created one of the most serious questions surrounding the Nolan Wells investigation. Whether the document was an isolated act of misinformation or whether it represented a larger attempt to influence what people believed about the case. However, separating a true cover-up from simple misinformation requires careful examination of evidence rather than assumptions. A cover-up generally involves deliberate actions designed to hide facts, prevent information from becoming known, or protect specific individuals from scrutiny. Misinformation, on the other hand, can involve false or inaccurate information without necessarily being connected to a larger effort. The difference between the two depends on evidence showing coordination, intent, and a connection between separate actions. The alleged fake report alone does not establish the existence of a cover-up. A false document may have been created for many reasons, including attention, speculation, personal motives, or an attempt to influence public discussion. Without verified evidence identifying creator and their purpose, claims of a larger operation remain theories rather than confirmed conclusions. Pattern analysis becomes important when examining the possibility of a broader effort. Investigators would look at whether the report was connected to other false claims, whether similar methods were used to spread information, and whether different events appeared to follow a common strategy. However, multiple examples of misinformation do not automatically prove coordination. The focus must remain on verified facts. The confirmed existence of an alleged fake report raises questions about authenticity, distribution, and motive. It does not by itself prove that official evidence was hidden, that investigators were influenced, or that individuals involved in the case participated in creating false information. Another important issue is the difference between public suspicion and investigative proof. In high-profile cases, unanswered questions can lead to theories about hidden explanations These theories may encourage further examination, but they must be separated from conclusions supported by evidence. Several questions remain unresolved. Who created the document? How did it spread? Did the creator have access to private information? Was a goal to support a specific narrative, create confusion, or simply gain attention? These questions require evidence that has not been publicly established. The significance of a fake report may ultimately depend on what investigators discover about its origin. If it was created by an individual acting alone, the situation may represent a single act of misinformation. If evidence shows coordination, planning, or a broader effort to influence the investigation, the implications would be different. For now, the alleged report creates more questions than answers. The possibility of a larger cover-up remains unproven, but the unanswered issues surrounding the document continue to raise concerns about who created it and why. Because the biggest mystery may not be the report itself, but the questions it left behind. What new questions does this fake report raise? The alleged fake toxicology report did not provide the answers many people expected. Instead, it created a new series of questions around the origin of the document, the reason it appeared, and the possible impact it had on the Nolan Wells investigation. When a document presented as evidence is later questioned, the investigation often shifts from analyzing its contents to examining the circumstances behind its creation. One of the most important unanswered areas involves the timeline. Determining when the document was created, when it was first shared, and how quickly it spread could provide important information about its purpose. A complete timeline could help establish whether the report appeared randomly or whether it was released during a specific moment when it could influence public attention. Information gaps remain another significant issue. Questions about the creator, the source of the details included in the report, and the reason for its release have not been fully answered. Without confirmed information connecting the document to a specific individual, many possible explanations remain theories rather than established facts. Digital evidence may become a critical part of understanding the report's history. Online activity, archive posts, account information, file details, and sharing patterns can sometimes reveal how information moved through digital platforms. However, digital evidence must be carefully verified because online records can be incomplete, altered, or difficult to connect directly to a specific person. Another unresolved question involves access. Did the creator have knowledge of private information, or was the report produced using publicly available details? The answer could help determine whether the document resulted from unauthorized access, fabrication, or a combination of information from different sources. The report also raises questions about motive. Was the purpose to influence public opinion, support a particular theory, create confusion, or simply gain attention? Understanding motive is often one of the most difficult parts of an investigation because intentions cannot be proven without evidence connecting actions to a specific purpose. The distinction between questions and conclusions remains important. The existence of a fake document creates legitimate areas of investigation, but does not automatically prove who created it or why. Investigators must rely on verified evidence rather than assumptions based on who appear to benefit. The remaining mysteries surrounding the report may ultimately reveal more than the false information it contained. The creation, release, and spread of the document could provide insight into how information was manipulated during the investigation. However, one final question remains above all others. If someone was able to create and circulate a document designed to appear official, does that suggest a larger attempt to influence the Nolan Wells investigation itself? Is someone manipulating the Nolan Wells investigation? The alleged fake toxicology report became more than a disputed document. It became a question about information influence and the challenges investigators face when separating verified evidence from claims that spread without confirmation. After examining the origin of the report, its circulation, its possible impact, and the unanswered questions surrounding it, the central issue remains whether the document represented an isolated act of misinformation or part of a larger attempt to shape the direction of public attention. The confirmed facts remain limited. A document presented as a toxicology report circulated publicly. Questions were raised about its authenticity, and concerns developed about whether it was connected to any official source. The identity of the creator, the original distributor, and the purpose behind the document have not been publicly established through verified evidence. The rumors surrounding the report created multiple theories. Some suggested that the document may have benefited certain narratives, while others questioned whether it was designed to create confusion. However, theories must remain separate from confirmed findings. A person benefiting from misinformation does not automatically prove involvement, and a false document alone does not establish a coordinated effort. The investigation status depends on verified evidence rather than online discussion. Official investigations require reliable information, documented procedures, and evidence that can withstand scrutiny. The alleged report may have influenced public conversations, but its true importance depends on whether investigators can identify its source and determine why it was created. Future developments may depend on digital evidence, witness information, and any additional findings connected to the document's creation and distribution. If investigators identify the person responsible, the motive behind the report may become clearer. If the source remains unknown, questions about its purpose may continue. This situation also highlights the importance of critical thinking during active investigations. Information that appears official must still be verified. Documents, screenshot, and online claims can influence public perception, but evidence requires confirmation, context, and reliable sources. The fake toxicology report has already been exposed, but the person behind it remains unknown. Until investigators answer that question, one possibility cannot be ignored. Someone wanted attention focused in the wrong place. In the Nolan Wells investigation, the biggest obstacle may not have been missing evidence, but manufactured misinformation. The final answer may not come from the document itself, but from discovering who created it, why it appeared, and what they hoped people would believe. Until those questions are answered, the role of the fake report remains unresolved, and the full impact of its appearance may continue to be examined.